Hi, everybody out there. Once again with us, some familiar faces. Bryant Thomas, a longtime news person, lately with the AP News Bureau in Washington, D.C. Also, Mark Collinsworth, who is a financial advisor, but has his eye on all kinds of developments around the world and domestically in terms of how it relates to the economy and also generally the direction of the country. And of course, my old compatriot, Kent Garrett. We worked together at Fox 40 in Binghamton, New York for a number of years. And Ken has a long career with CBS and other networks in New York City. So let's begin. The big topic of the day, big topic of the week, and probably for the months ahead is the renewed calls for strict gun control measures following those two mass shootings and where it goes from here. So let's start with Brian. I know you're a strongly supporter of increased gun control. So why don't you start off the conversation?
Well, I think it's time. How many more children have to die before we do something about crazy guns that are being sold to people whose only design was to be used in combat and shoot 100 rounds a minute. There's no reason anybody in civilian life needs to have a gun that dangerous, period. I don't even want to go to argue that point. It was designed for war. It was not designed for civilian use. And, it's to the point where we've got to do something, and we must begin in order to begin, as I told you yesterday on the phone. And so far, no one has begun. And that's tragic.
Mark, where would you begin? What's your opinion overall on this?
I'm a very strong supporter of the Second Amendment. And the reason why is because criminals are still going to get the guns. They bring drugs in, high-powered guns. The true assault weapons, people call an AR-15 an assault weapon. I was in the military and shot an M16. And trust me, if I had to go to war, I will not carry an AR-15. I'm getting an M16. An M16 cost the government $16,000. My AR-15 that I own cost me $500. That alone should tell you that an AR-15 is not designed for combat. Yeah, it shoots a lot of rounds, but it's nowhere near what an M16 is about.
For those who may not know the difference between automatic and semi-automatic, automatic, you press the trigger and boom, 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 it fires continuously and rapidly. Semi-automatic, you have to press the trigger each separate time. Automatic weapons have been outlawed for years and years and years, so it's not illegal to own a fully automatic weapon. Kent, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think I agree with Brian. I'm somewhat optimistic now that something might get done, in the sense that I'm not sure how significant it'll be, but I think the political environment and the realities of what happened in Uvalde might move the needle a little bit. I think what might happen in Congress is that they might agree. It might be watered down, some sort of background check, tightening some of the background check rules, but I think that'll be the first step. But I think ultimately, and I think all the statistics show this in terms of countries around the world, is that if there are less guns in the population, there's less murders and less mass shootings. Case closed. I mean, I don't think anybody disagrees with that.
Okay, you say fewer guns. Now, is that your focus on so-called assault weapons or guns generally?
This is just guns in general. I mean, I would advocate some sort of buyback program, for national buyback program to buy back guns. Any kind of gun you have, the government will give you X amount of money for it. And I think a lot will come in. I think it'll take a lot of guns off the market and lead to less mass shootings.
Will criminals be turning in their guns?
I don't think criminals will, but there'll be less. I mean, I think that this idea of the good guy with the gun versus the bad guy with the gun has been thoroughly disproven by what happened in Uvalde. I mean, and so I don't think this idea of we should have people having guns to protect themselves is going to really work.
Why do you say it was disproven in Uvalde?
Well, because there were those 19 cops, good guys, who were standing out there in the hallway while these kids were being killed inside.
They were told to stand down.
Well, we know
Well,
that.
we know
That's
that,
not that. Yeah,
That's not the point.
I mean, the point is they all had guns, 19 of them, and either through a snafu or some other event, some other miscommunication, whatever, they were told not to go in, not to stop the gunmen. So those guns were useless. So, I mean, I don't see what the analogy is. Good guys with guns are not effective. Mark, and by the way, we can mix it up. You don't have to wait your turn or anything. Mark, what do you think?
Look, can you spell chicken?
You're right, chicken or coward, one or the other.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm just thinking, no rapid response SWAT team member has to wait for directions from on high when there's something that he can see in his eyes that needs solving. And I sat there and I watched all of these clumsy explanations come out of the people in Texas and said, you know, what was going on here? Why wasn't there this push to get this shooter under control before he killed all those people? And that's what was most puzzling. And you know, the parents are not buying it. And you know, even Abbott is understanding of the horrible position it puts him in. You know, I think that, you know, it's as more of this comes out, it's going to get dirtier and dirtier.
Well, Brian, that kind of illustrates my point. I think what we were talking about in this round was that Kent maintains that good guys with guns are not effective, so everybody should turn in their guns. I'm saying you can't use that as an example because they were told to stand down. If they went in there, it would have been an entirely different story. And you know, in terms of, look, I've never been a big fan of the NRA, but as I said before, there's one bumper sticker that is ringing more and more true, is that when guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns.
I don't believe that.
You don't
believe that? No, I think there's, you know, Mark makes a good point that outlaws will always find a way to get a gun. I tend to agree with that.
Yeah, but there are not that many outlaws, Larry.
But to make a generalization that one size fits all, no, I don't.
Exactly.
What's wrong with what you call my generalization? Are you saying that if you confiscate all guns, or at least encourage everybody to turn them in, as Kent advocates, that that's going to stop bad guys from getting guns?
But Larry, first off, there aren't that many bad guys in terms of mass killers, mass shooters. That's the first thing. And then I think the police can handle some of these other bad guys that you talk about.
Ken, what's going on in the cities the past couple of years? I mean, Philadelphia, you know, which I don't live there very far from. You know, all the shootings with handguns, by the way, and Chicago, in all of the nation's big cities, run by Democrats, although I'm not taking political sides here. But you know, violence is increasing, and people, you know, the criminals are freely shooting up the place, robbing, pillaging, setting fires. It's more, I mean, this is what's going on. You can't deny that. So, I mean, these people with these mostly handguns are not going to give up their guns in any buyback program. They own them illegally to begin with. And then when they're caught, they get a slap on the wrist with a lot of these woke prosecutors that won't prosecute. They're given very light sentences. So, I mean, I don't see how confiscating guns, making many fewer of them on the landscape is going to stop this kind of, it's not.
Yeah, but I mean, it's worked in other countries, Larry. It's worked in Australia. It's worked in the UK. It's, you know, I mean, the statistics show that it has worked.
In most of those countries that you mentioned and others.
And Japan as well. Yeah, go ahead.
It's a much more homogenous population that generally have a population that adheres to rules and tradition. In the US, you know, a lot of it's like the Wild West, and it's getting worse and worse. So I don't see how.
But I think I think the Wild West culture, as you talk about, decreases if there are less guns in the nation.
Mark?
Well, speaking of that, Switzerland's, the United States per person, the United States has the most gun ownership per person. Switzerland has the second most gun. I think in the United States, the average person owns 7 guns. In Switzerland, the average is 5 guns per person. And guess what? They have 0 mass shootings. Why? Because you're required under Swiss law to serve in the military. And once you leave the military, they actually allow you to purchase your handgun to carry with you. So almost everybody in Switzerland is always carrying a gun, and they've been professionally trained. If you want to stop mass shootings, the mass shootings occur where guns are illegal to carry. Pass a law that requires everyone to carry a gun similar to what's in Switzerland, and you'll stop your mass shootings to a dead T.
Look, I'll use myself as an example. Now, I live in a rustic area in Pennsylvania. I mean, in addition to predators that surround me, including mountain lions, although the Game Commission says they don't exist in Pennsylvania, and also, in terms of protection against humans, I mean, the response time from cops, is nowhere near assurance that they're going to get here in time. So, what do people do to protect themselves?
Are you trained with your weapon, Larry?
Yes,
Are
I
you
am.
trained?
Yes,
You're trained.
yes.
All right.
But I mean, even if I were not trained, Kent, it's some defense. Somebody breaks into my house with a gun and I don't have a gun. What am I supposed to do?
Well, I got a question for both Brian and Kent. Do either one of you guys own guns for home protection?
I've had, when I was farming about 10 years ago, I had a gun. I had a rifle that I used to deal with pigeons or whatever in the barn and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, and when I was in the Boy Scouts, Explorer Scouts way back in the day, I became a really good shot with these guns. I mean, I was an expert marksman. Well, I mean, I understand. I mean, where I live now in Delaware County, I mean, it's a part of the culture here, but not AR-15s. I mean, the kids grow up they go out hunting with their fathers and dads and family, that sort of thing. But the AR-15 is not part of the project.
Well, that's what I'm saying, Ken. I mean, look, I'll concede that the AR-15s, even though they're not, an actual weapon of war compared to what they use in the military, they are an enticement for kids and other deranged people that are already on the edge. It's sexy, it makes them feel manly. Right. It increases your testosterone just looking at something like that. I agree, that could be an inducement, but those are with people that are already on the edge. So you take away the AR-15s, you're still going to have nutcases there on the edge that are going to use a handgun or some other weapon. They may not be able to kill as many people as quickly without an AR-15, but you're still going to have that problem. And again, in the big cities, the murder rate is sky high every weekend in Philadelphia, Chicago, other big cities. It's indisputable. All these killings, not all at once, but in Philadelphia, there were 3 people killed, 14 wounded over the weekend. In Chicago, the head count was even more than that. You see this more and more frequently, and these are the criminals. These are the punks and other people that are not going to give up their guns. And there's so many guns out there now, they could easily get them in the black market. There's no problem, and gun turn-ins and buybacks will not solve that.
Well, I think. Go ahead.
The thing with no one is going to say to a sportsman, I want your deer rifle. Okay, that's garbage. I would never think that would be the case. And I think what the NRA fears is if we open that door, somebody's going to drive a truck through it.
Slippery slope. And I think there is some validity to that, even though I'd like to see the something done with assault weapons in the hands of nutcases. The NRA has been making that argument for years that once you start one thing, then the next step will be a little bit more piece of it, and pretty soon you have so many restrictions. It's impossible to get a gun. So, but it's a balance, and it's a difficult situation to solve. But there is no way that mass gun buybacks is going to take so many guns off the street that the criminals are not going to get their hands on guns, which are black.
Well, I disagree with you on that, Larry. But I mean, I think a combination of AR-15, getting rid of those or getting restrictions, like for example, in New York here, we just raised the age at which you can buy an AR-15 to 21. It has
Sensible.
18.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's good. That's one step.
yeah.
Second step, which didn't quite work here in New York, is that we have these red tag laws, I guess you call them. And theoretically, if your family says or reports that you're unstable, that you're a danger to yourself, that you have done some sort of talked about crime and that sort of thing, you get a due process hearing, and a judge decides whether you can buy access to a gun. Now, it didn't work in Buffalo. I mean, theoretically, it should have worked because the kid who did the shooting there had been in the psychiatric sort of, situation. But I think those kind of laws would work as well, would really work. I mean, a lot of these people you talk about who are buying or shooting in Philadelphia and Chicago are people that if they had strict red tag laws, might not have been able to get those guns that they're killing people, or maybe getting them, as you say, illegally, but there'd be less out there on the market.
And
And the whole point is didn't the sister of the shooter in Texas refuse to buy a gun for her brother?
Right, exactly, yeah.
So,
And if he
I
played
mean,
it, right,
and
right.
yet she didn't report that
Right.
little escapade to the police. So, there's going to be missed balls and missed boats and dropped balls all along. No matter what first solution is advanced for trying to rein in the availability of dangerous weapons, not weapons for defense or weapons for hunting and stuff like that. The minute you say we're going to go after semi-automatic weapons or weapons that can shoot 100 rounds a minute, you're gonna stir everybody up. That's a given.
well, first of all, you can't shoot 100 rounds a minute with a semi-automatic. You just can't pull the trigger that fast. It could hold 100 rounds, but look at how already there's indications that the slippery slope. Biden the other day said 9mm, the high, large caliber bullet 9mm. Which is, he doesn't know what he's talking about. 9mm is not considered large caliber, and it's the most popular round in the U.S. for handguns. Now, is he going to have everybody who has a 9mm handgun turn them in? That's the most popular caliber. And
first of all, it's not going to happen. So much of this argument is hyperbole.
The President of the United States is making that statement, and the Democrats are reinforcing that stuff. They're also talking about limiting the number of rounds, no more than, what did he say, 10 rounds? All these modern pistols carry more than 10 rounds. They're designed for that. So, I mean, again, already the President of the United States leading this charge, a lot of the Democrats, calling for even more extreme measures. He's already put out 9mm ammunition should be banned. Now, it shows you how ignorant these people are when they talk about gun control and the nature of guns.
Look, if something gets done this week in the Senate, and I suspect they'll stumble into something, there's going to be a lot of give and take. And you're not going to see anything that extreme come out of the Senate, guaranteed. Otherwise, they couldn't get one Republican to vote for it.
Maybe you won't see it immediately. But
Larry, I think this whole idea of the slippery slope is really a reflex on the part of the NRA and that sort of thing. And I think it all gets down to politically, in the sense that a lot of these GOP folks are getting contributions from the NRA.
Right.
Secondly, a lot of them, I think the Republicans want to run. I think in a very macabre way, the Republicans want this kind of chaos in the sense that they want to get people scared. They want to use racist stuff. They want people to fear the other, and they want they want to just rile their base up, and this is how they do it.
Ken, in terms of chaos, most of this is coming from the policies of the Biden administration. I mean, the crime is in.
Come on, Larry.
Come on. The fentanyl has increased across the southern border. By the way, those coming across the southern border don't even have to be vaccinated. Explain that to me. And also human trafficking has increased, crime out of control in the cities. It's one thing after another in terms of creating chaos. The Democrats are responsible for that.
And no, none of this went on during Trump's years, right?
Not to this nowhere near.
Oh, stop it.
I have to throw this out here.
Come
I've got to throw
on.
this out here. There's a thing called the misery index. You probably remember it. Ronald Reagan used it on Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter had the worst score on the misery index. So instead of economic numbers, has nothing to do with personality. Jimmy Carter had scored the highest ever for people being the most miserable. Guess what president had the lowest score, meaning that people were happier than any other president going back to 1945 when the misery index was created? Was Donald Trump. Joe Biden took the lowest score ever from Donald Trump on the misery index, meaning the people were the happiest, and he has now moved that up to the third highest score since 1945, that people are more miserable now than they've ever been in history, except for Jimmy Carter. That is a direct result of the Democrats and their problems.
And more generally, what you could trace all this gun violence and criminal activity to is the breakdown of the family, the core family, and core Western values that largely revolve around Judeo-Christian principles. All these leaders, talking about inequality and this and that. How about emphasizing getting back to the structure of the family, fathers in the homes? How about getting back to the values that we were raised with? That's all going out the window now. And that's what has contributed to kids going nuts. They're not being raised with any kind of structure or discipline. And, the Biden and his crew are all for this. Black Lives Matter is such
For that, come on.
The nuclear family is no longer necessary.
Come on, look at Trump. I mean, come on. You think Trump is into family values?
You have to judge Trump not on his personality and his boisterousness, but on the effects of his policies. I don't care about his personality. You measure the effects of his policies. Look at what's happened since Biden's been in office. Not even a year and a half. Look at gas prices. And Brian, that isn't all price gouging by the companies. That's not the way it works. If that were the case, then they never would have let the prices drop that low during the Trump administration. And Mark knows a lot about that.
I'm sure, from the oil patch, he has his view about this. All I'm saying is if the oil industry has all the money and the rest of us are broke, what do we do then?
Well, something I want to kind of throw, I think Bryant mentioned earlier that there will be no major legislation that will come out that Republicans won't vote for. One thing I want to bring up, when Adolf Hitler, a lot of people think Adolf Hitler basically took guns away from people. That's actually a fallacy. The laws were, the very strict gun laws were already on the books years. The gun laws in Germany actually were a result of the Treaty of Versailles from World War I as part of their punishment. When Adolf Hitler came in there, he really, really enforced those laws to the very max, and even specifically targeted certain races to take their weapons away specifically from them. So my concern here is you pass these laws, just even minor laws today, what stops some idiot 10, 15 years down the road from coming in the United States? And how presidents like to use executive orders these days. They think they're kings with them. What's stopping someone from really taking your Second Amendment rights away from you 10 to 15 years down the road based on what happens today?
I understand those concerns. I think that they're legitimate. But as I said in the beginning, how many more kids have to die before we do something?
Well, why can't we put, like here where I live at, every school here in my town has a police officer assigned to it, an armed police officer. We don't have mass shootings. Why can't they put money towards finding out why people do this? I mean, there's got to be a mental issue for someone that wants to go and shoot children. Why not address that? Because if you take guns away from them, they'll simply just drive a car through the playground as a countermeasure. Then what do? We outlaw cars? I mean, where does it stop if you're not addressing the actual cause of the problem?
Yeah, look what happened back last year. What was it around? There was a Christmas parade. A guy drove through a crowd of people.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And, And by the way, that was racially, that was a hate crime. The guy hated white people. And a lot of this racial stuff is going on in New York, not just against whites, but against Asians as well. But I mean, we're drifting off the topic here. What I'm saying is, I agree, something has to be done. How many more kids?
Well, Larry, what do you think should be done? I mean, give me 3 things you think should be done.
What I think they should do is put more restrictions on who could get a hold of assault weapons, more red flags, raising the age of purchase as they did in New York is a good start. But the mass shootings got the most attention because it's so many people at once. It's so dramatic, so heinous. But most of the murders in the U.S. and people wounded in gunfire, it was with handguns. And most of that goes on in the big cities, and the Democrats are doing nothing to curb that. So
I don't agree with that. There's no Democratic mayor who would not be objecting to these mass murders and proposing things to bridle the crime war. That's crazy.
Are you familiar with Gascon? Are you familiar with all these woke prosecutors that are giving people a tap on the wrist? They're letting people out and they're committing crimes again. Bodine, who's about to be recalled in San Francisco. I mean, and by the way, not to sound like a conspiracy nut, but George Soros is a guy who funded the campaigns that put these liberal prosecutors in office, these extremely liberal prosecutors, and he's the one who funds to campaign against the recalls. So, what is going on here? I mean, it's like all these moves that are weakening the country, either by design or by happenstance, whatever, but the overall effect is a disintegration of the traditional values and structures that we grew up with. And that's why these kids are going nuts. And that's why criminals are roaming freely and getting more and more emboldened. Looking at California now, if you steal under $1,000 worth of goods from a store, it's a misdemeanor. And they're not even required to set bail, and then they go out and do it again. I mean, they do it openly, blatantly, brazenly, and there's nothing being done. And that's because of the liberal prosecutors and DAs in these big cities.
Look, we haven't built a jail we didn't fill. So what are you going to do? Build more jails in California so that more people are in jail than are free?
No, that's not a valid counter argument. What you do is put people in jail who deserve to be put there for violent crimes and not let them out easily or give them light sentences. I understand the argument and agree with it that a lot of people were overcharged and over prosecuted, but a lot of that they've moved the other way from that now because of all the accusations of race and all that. And now the criminals really get off with a slap on the wrist with some real serious crimes. So no, what I'm saying is make sure you put the real bad guys in jail and keep them there. The other people, don't hassle like they used to in the old days.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was gonna say, so back to, earlier when I asked you, if you guys have guns, let's hypothetically, let's say 2 or 3 guys broke into your home and they have handguns and they are determined home invasion to cause bodily harm to you and your family. And you have a choice between picking up a handgun or an AR-15. Which one are you going to pick up?
Well, obviously an AR-15 if you have it.
Yeah.
Well, I think just having a regular handgun is a deterrent. Most of these guys don't expect the homeowner to have a gun or to even defend themselves. So, I mean, just having a handgun is a big deterrent. But most of these criminals don't, because so many people don't have guns, they're afraid of guns, they don't want to deal with guns. They know that they could break in and cause mayhem without much consequence or danger. I mean, that's increasing across the country now. So, I mean, it's gone so far now, especially in terms of traditional structure and values falling apart, especially with families. Family values are out the window. There's no longer solid 2-parent homes. A lot of them are single parent, if that, or a single parent is on drugs, whatever. So the kids are, there's nothing that the kids aren't born bad. They're not genetically inclined to violence. It's just that the family structure isn't there anymore, that there's no holds on them. So naturally, kids grow up wild. We would be the same products of that if we came from the same background. So how do you fix that at this point? It's the horse has already run out of the barn. I mean, it's a massive undertaking to restore the kind of structures that we grew up with. So there's no simple solution. But yeah, all right. If you want to restrict AR-15s, that's fine. But I'm saying that's not going to stop a lot of the crime, because most of that is committed with handguns, and most of it's committed by either hardened criminals or crazy kids who've grown up with an unstructured environment, and that's going to be difficult to change, especially anytime soon.
You know, what's interesting is I was reading the stats from the federal government about shootings, fatal shootings in this country. For every year in the past 10 years, suicides have led the list. And a lot of people forget that.
And why is that?
Well, who knows? They don't make the headlines.
A lot of it is a disruption of the family, disruption of jobs, the economy. Look at the military people that are committing suicide now, cops that are committing suicide. It's because everything is haywire, upside down from the world we used to live in, and it is getting worse. I mean,
Well, Mark, what do you think? And I mean, you other than giving everybody a gun, I mean, at this point, what do you think should be done?
Well, I think the first thing is, address the cause. Why are these people doing that, and try to pinpoint that.
Mhm.
They tend to want to, your gun, whenever there's a mass shooting, the mass shootings always tend to occur in no gun zones. There's a reason why they go to no gun zones. And that kind of brings me back to schools are no gun zones. Why don't they have resource officers like they do where I live at every school to prevent this kind of stuff? Why don't they go ahead and try to reinforce doors on schools, make doors harder to breach? I mean, if I go to my child's school over here, I have to go up to the door. The doors are locked. I have to push a button for a video camera to show at me. I have to tell them who I am, who's my child, why I'm there, and flash my ID at the camera to even get in the door. And even then, when I go through the door, there's a police officer standing there that's going to make sure he escorts me into the principal's office to conduct my business. I mean, why can't they do that in schools across America?
Money.
Kent, where I live, getting back to, people with guns and all that,
Yeah.
you mentioned in your area and Mark and his, kids around here, everybody has a gun around here. Kids grow up with it for hunting, target practice. It's no big deal. You don't hear about them shooting up their schools or going and robbing stores. You hear about that from the criminal elements in the Scranton area and sometimes out in the suburbs. But I mean,
Well, this kid in Texas was not a criminal before this.
he was on the fringe. He had some mental issues, and nobody caught it. Nobody did anything about it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But he had no criminal record.
But didn't he post on Facebook the same day that he was going to kill people?
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
People-
same day, yeah.
And nobody picked that up either.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, it's what's going on with society in general that's not allowing this, but it's a result of, again, the breakup of traditional values and traditional breaks on things. Religion used to play a part, but now that's out the window.
Let me tell you something. I had an absent father. He was an alcoholic, and nobody had a more screwed up childhood probably than I did, in terms of value judgments. I never got into trouble, never wanted to get into trouble, and I grew up to be a sufficient human being. So to generalize by saying that family breakdowns are at the heart of this, I think is erroneous.
All right, Brian, let me ask you this. You don't have to get too personal with details, but although your father may have been an alcoholic, you had people in your family that kept you somewhat stable. There were other people that looked after you. You weren't freely set loose without, even another parent in the household who was stable. There were people around you. A lot of people have a screwed up father or mother, but in the old days, it wasn't to the extent now where anything goes. You know, in schools, discipline is breaking down. They can't discipline kids anymore because, you know, it's either racist or they're picking on a kid.
But you mean to tell me that every child who's got a problem with and a non-nuclear family has got a support system in the rest of the family, or is it some part of the individual that has to say, look, I don't want to go down that road of wrongness?
What, yeah, why does an individual say that? Look, usually in these cases where you don't have, where you have a one-parent family, there's somebody around, an aunt, a grandfather, somebody who's keeping the kids somewhat on the straight and narrow, or a mentor. It could be somebody from the community. And that's what's happening now. And I'm saying that's why there's no quick fix to this. But again, taking guns away, having everybody turn in guns, it's not going to work because the criminals and the nutcases are going to get a hold of guns one way or the other. It may not be an AR-15, so it'll be a handgun or some other weapon or a car.
Well, we have more guns than than people in this country by 50 million. I think that's really out of whack.
Right, and why not try the getting rid of the guns? I mean, as I say, it works in other countries, but I think politically something's going to happen this time. I think the country, I mean, I think the GOP is going to have to bend a bit, and I think they'll do something in Congress at the end of the week or next week.
Could well be. I think that, and you know, if that works against them in polls between now and, you know, the summertime, and the Roe versus Wade thing works against them between now and the summertime, you may see a lot of things that the Republicans would not have dared do suddenly become attractive.
Mark, what do you think?
I would kind of agree with some of that, but I think one of the more important things here is, and I was actually watching this as an interview with an ATF agent on Fox News, and he said that the ATF has not seen any kind of major increase in their budget since the 1970s, and there's only like 2,000 employees at the ATF. I think if you're going to regulate guns, I think a budget of $1 billion and 2,000 employees certainly isn't going to do it with a 300 million population where the average person owns 7 guns.
That's just true. That's a good point.
Yeah, I don't know where it's going to go this week, but it's
there's no one solution that fits all here, Larry. I think we've discovered that tonight. But to do nothing is not acceptable.
But again,
and what we've done is so far is nothing.
Yeah, well, what we could do is tighten up the red flag laws, see that it's monitored more closely,
Right.
Raise the ages, you know, here and there, other qualifications for something like an assault rifle. But in terms of handguns, if you get everybody turning handguns, the good guys are going to be largely left defenseless. I mean, that's just how it works. I mean, there's so many guns out there now. It's easy to get a hold of one on the black market, and the people who want to do harm, who want to do no good, are going to get a hold of them. So the mass shootings may stop or diminish anyway, but you know, the generalized violence, especially in the big cities, will continue. That's how I see it. So, you know, I'd like to see something done, but you know, this developed slowly, and there's no quick solution. And again, Ken, I don't see how, if I turn in my gun, my neighbors turn in their guns, how that is going to stop crime, how this is going to tame everything down. Again, mass shootings may be diminished, especially if you confiscate AR-15s or restrict their use. But, you know, again, most of the violence, most of the murders are committed with handguns.
Right, but I'm just saying, if the handguns aren't available, if they're not around, there's going to be less.
Yeah, but who would they still be available to? The bad guys. Not, they just wouldn't be available to a citizen trying to protect himself. So how is that a solution?
And I would actually, you know, I'll even go out and say, you know, I'd be open to more gun laws if Congress would be willing to address more of the causes of it. You know, a lot of your guns that come into the United States are, you know, help support the drug industry. Why can't the government crack down on crime rate, on drug dealers bringing guns across the border through tunnels and stuff? There's a long list of things I think the government can do before you actually start taking guns away from people that did nothing wrong. I've never done anything wrong, but yet you want to restrict my gun possession?
One of the things I was talking with Larry about in a phone call earlier this week was, I have a friend who lives down in Gettysburg. He's a patron of Fox News and Newsmax and anything right wing. He loves it. He owns an AR-15, lives on a horse farm, alone in his house. All he does is watch the mares for his living. He's 80 years old. And I said, what do you need that for? Meaning the AR-15. And he said, just in case.
All right, now you may find that foolish on his part and unnecessary and overly alarmist. However, that's indicative of people's growing general dis-ease with what's going on in American society.
Oh, and not only that, he's buying into all the anti-democratic stuff. So I can understand where he's coming from, because he's tainted by that. And I have conversations with him to bring him down to earth a little bit. And he ends every conversation by saying to me, you know, I never thought about that. Whether does it change his mind? Who knows? I don't know. But you know, he at least he's willing to take some counterpoint from me, which I don't think he gets anywhere else.
No. All right, last words. Kent, you start.
I think something will happen. I think there have been too many deaths. I think that what happened in Uvalde is going to change the response. I think there'll be something coming out of Congress in the next couple of weeks or so. I think it'll be not particularly significant, but I think it'll be a first step. And I think we're on the way to getting something done.
Okay, what might that first step be?
I think that'll be making AR-15s less available to 18-year-olds, maybe trying to raise the age. I think there'll be efforts to try and get a national sort of red flag kind of laws in place. And I think there'll be some dealing with the mental issues as well. I mean, and that's what I think.
Mark?
I go back to, you know, before you start restricting gun ownership and hurting the people that did nothing wrong, concentrate on trying to find out why this stuff happens. Maybe doing a more in-depth background check on people, maybe that would help or something. But I don't think restricting guns should be the #1 priority when there's other issues you can do that work to solve the problem just as well.
Right.
I think there's something that's going to happen, you know, the next couple of weeks. I agree with Kent. I think, but I think we must crawl before we walk, and we weren't even crawling before. Is it going to be the kind of turnaround that will make gun control advocates happy? Probably not. Will it make the gun lobby happy? Probably not. But as I said, we must begin in order to begin. And, you know, if we do nothing, that's not acceptable.
Okay, and my analysis is that something should be done, but whether something can be done is largely up in the air at this point. And I think, as I've said, the overall problem is the disintegration of traditional values, traditional structures, and that is going to be very hard to fix. The root cause is going to be very hard to get to. But, you know, I hope in these first steps, they at least start concentrating on that, but we'll see. Guys, thanks very much for joining us. And,
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
and folks out there, we'll be back again with another lively discussion, and I think somewhat enlightening. So you be the judge of that, and join us again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, see ya.
Good night.
Thanks. Yeah. Bye.